Hey guys, Crypto Sunday, slightly down week this week, still sort of chopping around, about 4% for me, which is quite a bit worse than the market. These sort of Solana coins and things still not performing particularly well. Bitcoin sort of only down a couple of percent. Looking at the coin shares report, we got the third sort of slightly positive week in a row, which I suppose has to be seen as good. We're not getting these sort of fairly large red candles. It's 864 million in the positive, and that is largely Bitcoin and Ethereum. Even Ethereum sort of coming back to some gains, which is good. 522 on Bitcoin. 100 million out of the multi-asset. I don't think we've seen a triple figure outflow from the multi-asset before. So, yeah, interesting. One of the only sort of large reds. Solana and XRP both back to seeing reasonable inflows now that they've both got US ETFs. A little into Litecoin, a little out of Sui, 4 million into Chainlink, and sort of some small numbers really elsewhere. By country, sort of usual suspects. Some into Germany, some out of Switzerland, and US obviously 800 of that overall. So still very much the bulk. But it looks like those green weeks will probably come to an end, unless there was something crazy out of Europe. Bitcoin side for this week, we got 4 red days and one sort of fairly large green day. I suppose that was Fidelity's nearly 400 million in, although Monday and Thursday they had 400 million out combined. So it's a little bit all over the place. Negative from BlackRock, nearly 400 million on Tuesday and Friday, with some sort of small inflows being sandwiched by those. And nothing at all into the grayscales, just a small amount out of both on separate days. And Arc with nothing in at all, just 4 days of outflows and a zero. So yeah, not looking ideal for Bitcoin. And the Ethereum side was worse. No inflows at all to BlackRock or Fidelity on any day, and nothing into Bitwise or 21 shares. Just a couple of small inflows into the old and new grayscale, which I always sort of take as just largely trading. Or maybe not the new grayscale because it is the cheapest, but yeah, not a good week at all for Ethereum. On the Solana ones, though, they are still putting up some positive numbers. Admittedly, obviously the years haven't been going that long, so it's not as if people would be wanting to sell, positions that they bought months ago because these didn't exist. So you would expect sort of mostly inflow still or flat. But yeah, there was one outflow day for Bitwise, and other than that, it's positive across the board. Also got a 38 million inflow into Fidelity, so yeah, somebody was wanting to pile in or possibly sell their Solana sort of physically in inverted commas and buy the ETF. Could have just been an exchange or something. But yeah, some small but reasonable numbers in pretty much all week. Something that wasn't small was strategy again. So Mr. Saylor said back to more orange dots, and then yeah, to be fair, last week they've bought 10,645 Bitcoin, average of 92,000. So again, not the best price to be paying, but somehow he sort of manages to time that relatively poorly. And yeah, they now have 671,000, which is quite a hefty sum. I guess they may not like their sort of so-called Bitcoin yield, getting lower. That was sort of always what fascinated people and got the MNAV higher, although that has, I believe, crashed all the way down to almost 1. Last I checked, it was about 1.07. So, yeah, they're still not at a discount as far as that goes. That would be the best metric to look at, I would say. A lot of people saying they're at a discount just because the market cap is lower than the total value of the Bitcoin, but they've got convertible debt and the preferred shares to think about. So I think that's, if you include all of that, that is still that 1.07 MNAV. So yeah, not ideal, and almost touching $75,000 per Bitcoin average for them. Obviously, the other treasury companies are much, much higher. So not a huge amount of news this week. This is sort of basically all the talk at the moment. Sort of coming into obviously the end of 2025. It's a year and a half after the halving. It's when the sort of 4-year cycle of the past have generally come to an end, and it's generally the time at which Bitcoin has peaked. And we've had a 2025 October peak of 126,000 as there was a Twitter guy who I think 3 years ago or something predicted that pretty much to the day that it hit 126 would be the top, and obviously people are saying he was a soothsayer and a genius. But yeah, I still not quite buying into this 4-year cycle still being intact, and next year's almost guaranteed to be a bear market. Yeah, Jurian Timmer of Fidelity saying the current bearish action should last deep into 2026. I think we're sort of reading a little bit too much into not a lot of data points, which, to be fair, a lot of people are also dismissing this 4-year cycle being over. So I thought I'd look at some reasons that I dismiss it maybe. So one being sort of obviously we're not at the current peak of 126,000 at the moment. We're sitting at sort of 30. We are 30% down from that at 88,000. But we're currently at a 27 fear, almost extreme fear on the Fear and Greed Index. Was 15 last month. And so at the 126,000 top, we're just sticking the price on. Yeah, it was around 62, which is not quite extreme greed. I think that would be classed as ordinary greed. So yeah, we never got to, well, barely even got into the green of greed. So yeah, not quite sure I would call that sort of a euphoric top. We were much, much higher sort of at the Trump election times, where we got to sort of 100,000, and the March 2024 times just after the ETFs launched. So again, everyone sort of thought it was a little bit odd that we reached a new all-time high before the halving, which had never happened before. So that was somewhat sort of 4-year cycle busting. Everyone expecting a new all-time high sort of after the halving and probably into 2025, and we didn't get that. We got it 3 months before the halving because the ETFs were so explosive. And then yeah, we got an all-time high before 2025 on the Trump election. So yeah, I would say that sort of that metric, if you like, of the usual timing was blown out in 2024 basically, and then the all-time high that we've had, 126,000, wasn't really a euphoric top. It was sort of a somewhat whimpering top. We also have this from CoinMarketCap. They do a sort of roundup of crypto market cycle indicators. Various things you may have heard of them. The sort of Puel multiple. It's dividing sort of moving averages by current price, and you've got things like the ETF to Bitcoin ratio, how much is being held by ETFs. I thought that was an interesting one. So their target for the top is having less than 3.5% in ETFs, and we currently have 8.5%. So they're sort of saying a rising ratio suggests increasing demand, declining ratio may signal reduced interest or profit taking. So yeah, that's sort of not exactly triggered, and basically all of these are currently not triggered. You would sort of expect that. These are telling you whether we're at a cycle top, and at 88,000 we're unlikely to be a top. But I believe certainly not all of these triggered. I'm not sure whether any of these actually flashed as triggered at the 126k top. So yeah, I think some of these are sort of probably a little bit nonsense, really, but some I think I would give some weight to. Some of them look a little bit strange. They're sort of saying they would expect the top to be when MicroStrategy's average Bitcoin cost hits 155,000. I think we've seen them sort of buying like 10,000 Bitcoin, and it only moves their cost up like $500. I think they would have to, buy nearly all the Bitcoin in the world for their cost to get to 155. Obviously, we've never actually reached 155 in price. So, yeah, to get their average to that, obviously, if they bought like another 670,000 at 150,000, then it would sort of it wouldn't even take that anywhere near 155. It would be the midpoint of those two. So yeah, they have to buy like, I don't know, a million. I haven't done the maths. A million Bitcoin at sort of 275,000 or something, 300,000 to sort of get close to this figure. So that one seems complete nonsense to me. But yeah, some of these you could read into, and having 30, and I can't remember whether all of these 30 didn't trigger at the 126k top, but yeah, if they didn't, I would put some weight into that sort of not being the top. I think this would be one of my sort of more important ones. The U.S. federal funds rate. Basically, I think Bitcoin has sort of turned more into a macro asset now, and maybe was sort of before now. You had sort of 2017, admittedly, was sort of a rapid bull market, but it was still sort of quite a small asset. And you had US raising rates from 0.5% to 1.5%. But then 2018, they continued to raise rates from 1.5 to 2.5% throughout that year. So that wasn't exactly positive for crypto at all. And then similarly, 2021 was the peak of Bitcoin, sort of November 2021, and then almost immediately in 2022, obviously a bear market in crypto, you had the Fed raise rates from 0.25% to 4.5%. So that was the fastest increase sort of in history, I believe. So yeah, it's that sort of weighs quite heavily on crypto as well. So to say, it was all just because it was a year and a half after the halving, sort of halving being in mid 2020, it's a year and a half after that, so the crypto market has to come to an end. Fed funds rate has absolutely nothing to do with crypto, and them raising rates, all of that, I don't think is just coincidence. Obviously, that raising of rates had its effect on the stock market. If you look at the S&P 2017, where we had a tremendous bull market in crypto, was also a bull market in stocks, and the stock market sort of topped out a sort of temporary top, admittedly, in January 2018, where Bitcoin sort of topped around here, and we got a sort of that was the start of a little correction where they started continued raising rates, and it got worse. And admittedly, then the S&P did make a new high, sort of going into the end of 2018, but going into sort of November, December time, it did drop again. So 28.23 down to 25.06 at the bottom of 2018. So you got sort of interest rates rising, stock market falling, and you're expecting sort of crypto to have a good year. I wouldn't say so. Similarly, coming over to 2020, obviously we had the halving and the sort of COVID issues and everything, and you got an enormous amount of money printing. So the halving was June-ish 2020, June, July-ish, and you had the stock market rising all the way into the crypto bull market, obviously peaking in December 2021. And then again, similarly with them raising rates at the fastest period they ever have, you had the stock market falling from 4,766 to 35.85, and these are monthly numbers, so the exact top to bottom would be even more than that. And obviously this is around about where you had FTX collapse as well, and sort of Three Arrows Capital and all the sort of crypto specific things. But I would point out that in the macro world you had an enormous rate rising and stock market drop as well. So again, to be expecting crypto to do well amongst all of this, sort of idiosyncratically separate to all of the macro stuff, would be a bit crazy. And just sort of like reminding people that we are now, it would seem, in a rate cutting cycle as opposed to a rate raising cycle. I don't think anyone's expecting them to be raising next year. We're still talking about how many cuts there's going to be. Obviously, you've got a new Fed chair in May, and whoever it is, they're sort of talking about how many cuts Trump is going to try and convince them to do. So you don't have this raising, you don't have this raising, you have a series of cuts. And sort of going into the midterms, you'd expect them to be sort of throwing everything at the wall to try and coax the stock market as well. Admittedly, obviously 2018 and 2022 were also midterm years, but yeah, I just don't think it's as simple as saying that the halving makes that much of a difference. And just looking at the halving itself, obviously, I've said this before, I think previous halvings made considerably more of a difference. The first halving, you were sort of getting 50 Bitcoin issued every 10 minutes, going to 25. That obviously has an enormous amount of, the supply was increasing because of this 50 Bitcoin per 10 minutes. That was the main thing. It goes to 25. You've got far less miners selling. Similarly, sort of going down to 12 and a half. That makes quite a big difference. And then that sort of feeds into the 2017 bull market. You've got less miners selling, and then I would say it starts to diminish. We sort of get to the halving that we've got at the moment. You've already got 19.5 million out of 21 million Bitcoin issued. So whether people are selling that 19.5 million makes a far bigger difference than going from 6 Bitcoin issued to 3 Bitcoin issued. It's a tiny amount of the total that is left. So similarly, I think we're almost at 20 million Bitcoin out of 21 million issued now. So the next halving, going from 3 to 1.5, it's not going to make any difference. The amount of selling that miners are doing is just having such a small impact compared to whether the 20 million out of 21 million is being sold or not. So yeah, I think previous halvings have have had a lot more of an impact. I mean, you can look at it on, this is basically the same chart, inverse, sort of, it's the inflation rate. So again, sort of first halvings, before the first halvings, you were at thousands of percent. That sort of came down, and the 2012 halving, you're going from 30% annual inflation rate to 15, and then sort of 8% to 4%. And then, yeah, as you start to sort of get 3.5% to 1.8, that's less of an impact. 1.8% to 0.8%, it's just much, much less of an impact. Next one's going to be 0.8 to 0.4% inflation. It just has such a smaller impact, I would say. So, yeah, I think this idea that Bitcoin must peak sort of a year and a half after the halving, and everything related to Bitcoin's price is purely sort of Bitcoin specific, Bitcoin industry specific things, I would say is nonsense. We have to sort of pay attention to what's happening in the wider world, interest rates, stock market, global stuff as well. It's, I think people get a bit too US focused. You've got China and Europe sort of still printing money and sort of being at low interest rates. Yeah, I think just need to open our eyes to the world a little bit more. Obviously, I still do focus on Bitcoin specific things like the hash rate, because I'm still taking a bet on the miners with Hive and Iron. Obviously, this means more to Hive than it does Iron. But yeah, past week we've had a small peak of 1.22 exahash, not an all-time peak, but a little peak, and we've come back below 1 zettahash. So overall, I don't think this has made all that much difference. We've got the next difficulty adjustment on Christmas Day. It's scheduled for at the moment, and it's pretty much on target, 10.08 minutes. So another very small drop predicted to just under 147. Obviously I keep going back to it, but still way above the sort of just under 130 that we had back in August. So yeah, these small drops are a help. Not going up is a help, but yeah, still not ideal for miners. So coins for the week, they're all down. It's just how much. Bitcoin is down 1.6%. Not quite as bad as most of these. Solana down 5%. Ethereum 3.8. Chainlink 8%. Not exactly great for them. They don't normally do that much worse than Ethereum. HNT Helium down 11%, Radium down 13%, Metaplex down 25%. Not doing well at all. That was one of my sort of better performers at one point, but there you go. Gito 8.7%, and good old Honey down 14.5%. So there you go. I will just correct that and just make everything seem ever so slightly worse. Knocks £50 off near enough. So yeah, not a lot of difference in that anymore. These are going to be tax write-offs, I expect, at some point, unless we get a tremendous alt season. So yeah, leave your thoughts in comments below. Let's hope for a good 2026 and buck the 4-year cycle trend. And like and subscribe. See you soon.